Welcome to episode 17 of the Manage to Win podcast. I'm Jeff Russell, Director of Operations at Manage to Win. And with me is my co-host, David Russell, the CEO and founder of Manage to Win. Today, we're going to talk about employee recognition. Dad, what is employee recognition and why is it important?
So employee recognition is basically communicating that you appreciate something an employee did. And it is important because it basically connects them to meaningful work. It reinforces that they're doing some meaningful work, which is the second strand of our three strands leadership system. And then the third strand of sincere gratitude, basically sincerely appreciating them, being thankful for them. And it's an important part of leadership. We get caught up with firefighting. We get caught up with lots of things. And we might give a little, hey, nice job here or there. But employee recognition is much more than a pat on the back. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it's much more than that. And there's ways to do it well, and there's ways that you can do it poorly. Unfortunately, a lot of companies don't do it enough. And when they do it, they don't put quite enough effort into it. So it really doesn't connect with employees as much as it could.
And before we get into some of the ways to recognize employees, some of the ways companies succeed or fail, what's the benefit of recognizing employees? I mean, these and what are the negative aspects of not recognizing employees?
Well, I did a blog post on this week, and in it quotes a Gallup poll or two. And Gallup concluded that 65% of people received no recognition at all for good work in the workplace. I saw a similar statistic in a book called The Carrot Principle years ago. It's super important that we connect people to results. We connect people to our team. Everybody wants to feel part of a team. They want to feel part of a tribe. Remember Seth Godin wrote a book years ago about tribes?
Yeah.
And it was Malcolm Gladwell. Was it Malcolm Gladwell or Seth Godin? I can't remember.
I can look it up right now.
Yeah, you'll have to look it up. But that was a good book. As a matter of fact, I've got it on the bookshelf here somewhere, on one side or the other. But
it was Seth Godin.
It was Seth Godin. Okay. So really what you're doing is you're connecting people. And like we had Michael on the podcast recently, who's the connection culture guy, did a great job. And that's really what we're doing with employee recognition is we're connecting. And so the two areas that I like to emphasize you connect is that you connect that, hey, you're doing something that's important to you, that's personally fulfilling to you. And the second piece is the sincere gratitude piece. We appreciate you. We value you. And so there's certain ways to do that. And then the other component of three strands leadership, just to mention, is systematic power. Now, that's the foundation of all leadership. And that's what's missing for most people in employee recognition. They're not systematic. They're not consistent. And then when they do it, they don't really focus on connecting or reinforcing that, hey, you're doing meaningful work here. They do touch on to a certain degree. I mean, it's natural. If I'm saying thank you, then I am saying I appreciate you as a member of the team. But there's ways to do that are minor, and there's other ways to do it that are major. And we really, if we're going to be great leaders, we want to do it in the most effective way. Because when we do that, we get people fully connected, and they take more responsibility for results. And you create more of a connection with them, more of a bond, that you're on the same team, going in the same direction, have the same plan type of thing.
Can you describe systematic power just for anybody who might be listening that doesn't know what we're talking about?
Systematic power is the foundation of three strands leadership. And what it is, it came about because when I had my epiphany that I had leadership attributes, but no real skills. This was back in 2003, February of 2003. Really what came forth was that I was very inconsistent. So systematic power has 7 components to it. Basically, the first is that you make the tough decisions in what you do. Okay, so you do that. You make the tough decisions on a timely basis. You hold people accountable for what they're doing, and you do it in a very fair way. And you're consistent in what you do. And then the 4 management disciplines: how you hire, how you manage people, how you develop them, and how you retain them. So that's all the systematic power. And when you think of employee recognition, it ties into those first 3 kind of decision-making things, behavioral attributes. But then it also ties into how am I managing people, how am I developing them, and how am I retaining them. That makes sense?
Yeah. So when that relates to recognizing employees, what does that look like? Without systematic power, and then with systematic power?
Well, let me back up for a moment. Let me give you, this should wake somebody up. So we had a client for a little bit. We had to, end the relationship early because he did not want to go in the direction that we were recommending he go. But he had a service manager who was managing help desk of I think it was about 10 people. And that service manager took off 3 weeks on maternity leave because his wife had a baby. And another young guy filled in for him for 3 weeks. Now, this guy was working like 10-hour days, maybe longer, coming in early, leaving late, really doing a good job. So about a week into it, the boss's assistant, the owner's assistant, contacted me, I think email, and said, hey, the boss just want to let you know that this guy's doing a good job covering for the person that's out. And I said, well, that's great. And please, please confirm that, go over there and thank him, let him know. And I talked with the boss the following week while the other guy was still out and this young guy was covering. And I said, did you go over and thank him? He said, no. I said, why not? And he said, well, I'm old school. We don't thank people for doing just for what they should do. They have to go really above and beyond. I said, wait a minute, this guy's working long hours. He's covering his responsibilities plus these other responsibilities. I mean, the least you can do is walk across the office and say thanks. He said, no, I don't look at it that way. So, I mean, it was a bad sign. We ended up terminating the relationship early. And the young guy who was doing such an outstanding job quit about a month or 2 later. So this is what happens when we take our people for granted. We want them to own things. We want them to be fully engaged, but they're not going to do it unless we reinforce it and we encourage them and we connect with them. We can't just take it for granted. And so that's the flip side. All right.
That's failing to be systematic in recognizing employees.
Well, actually, yeah, he was systematic in not recognizing employees.
Sounds like it.
That's not the way to go. What was your question again? I felt I needed to tell that story to say the bad to then get into the good.
Yeah, I was just asking you to illustrate what it looks like when someone is not systematic in recognizing employees and when they are systematic in recognizing employees. So kind of illustrating why systematic power is important in employee recognition.
Yeah. So I just gave you the an example of the opposite extreme, the one you do not want to be in. The most common ones are leaders have good intentions and they'll say thank you once in a while. They'll, appreciate something. They might bring something up because they get a client satisfaction survey that says, hey, this person did a great job. But it's not consistent. And the problem is when you take that approach, you end up reprimanding or correcting people more than you recognize them. And if I say to you, if I say to a worker, if I say, hey, let's say I talk to you, Jeff, because you post these podcasts. If I say to you, hey, you did a great job getting that produced and posted today. But and then I come up with some complaint over something you did. I can't think of anything because you always do things right. But
I don't always do things right.
If I then, well, if I said, yeah, but your door was open in the background the whole time the podcast, that should have been closed. What are you going to remember? You're going to remember my correction. You're not going to remember the compliment. And too often leaders get caught up in that. So these surveys that I mentioned of where the Gallup and the Carrot Principle book came back and said 65 or 67% of all employees said they had not received a single compliment during the prior year. I don't believe those numbers are correct. I believe most, if not all of those employees were all complimented, but the leader put their big butt into it, where they said, oh, you did a great job, but if you'd just done this, it would have been a lot better. And what happens is the big butt stays in your face, and you remember that correction or that reprimand or that tone of voice, and the compliment is gone. You don't remember that at all.
So it sounds like being systematic in recognizing employees involves not only remembering to do it regularly, but remembering to do it the right way.
Yeah, definitely. And so we recommend, and there's a link to it in this week's blog post, a recognition survey. And it's pretty long. It's like 25 or 30 questions. And it asks people, who's your favorite actor? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite color? What's your favorite restaurant? Actually, all these things. And so you actually can do this survey with your employees. You can put somebody on your team in charge of the program. And so when you want to recognize someone, you can go in and choose something that they really like. So I have one young manager, and he wanted to recognize a member of his help desk. And I said, well, did you use the recognition survey we have? He said, well, actually, as a matter of fact, we did. And I said, well, does he have a superhero or something that he really likes? And he brought up some Marvel, or maybe it was DC comic. I don't know. It was some off character that was a superhero. I said, well, great. I said, I'm looking on Amazon. It's $29 for a full-size cardboard image of this superhero, life size. I said, why don't you get that and put a speech bubble on it that gives him a specific compliment for what he did. Wait until he leaves for the evening, put it in his cubicle that night, so when he comes in the next day, he'll see it. And what happened was the employee came in the next day, and there's his favorite superhero. It's not just any superhero. It's his favorite superhero, with a speech blurb about, you're awesome, or you did a great job on this project or whatever it was. And my understanding is that guy had that superhero in his cubicle for months. And, it was meaningful because it was personal. And that's what you want to do, is you want to touch someone's heart when you do it. And if you do the survey, you're set up for then, if you have reminders to think about, okay, who do I need to recognize this week or this month or whatever it is, you can go back and choose something that will be meaningful for people. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like there's a variety of ways that you can recognize people as long as it is specific to them.
I know, Jeff, if I gave you a Starbucks card because you'd done a great job, how well would that resonate with you?
Yeah, I wouldn't really care.
Yeah, you talk to some people who don't like Starbucks, and they're like, oh yeah, I get those all the time. I just repurpose them. I give them to other people. That's not the type of compliments we want to give. That's not the type of recognition that we want to do. But you want something that touches the heart. And it also comes back to how you compliment. Just a simple compliment. In our training, I teach people how to compliment. Sometimes it's great. The good boy, good job, really appreciate what you did. Those short little brief ones, those are great. You can do those daily, whatever. Those are great. But if I say to you, hey, Jeff, nice job on the podcast. That feels okay, right? I mean, that's pretty good. That's all right. Okay. But every once in a while, if I say, hey, Jeff, really appreciate what you did on the podcast. The two questions you asked, the one about this and the one about that, I thought were fantastic. Those were great. Keep it up. Now, am I right? Doesn't that touch you a little bit more in the heart? It's like, oh yeah, he noticed. Yeah, that was pretty good. I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah,
Doesn't it?
it's specific and it shows that you're paying attention.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's what recognition should be. Sincere gratitude. It shows that sincerely I care and sincerely I notice. And that's a big deal. And a lot of people don't know how to compliment that way. So if you're a leader who doesn't typically compliment that way, that's a great habit to learn. Now, if you do that all the time, all day long, it's going to come across you're lacking sincerity, or at least you're going to be wasting people's time. Okay. But once in a while, once a month or something, once a week, whatever's appropriate in your particular environment, that's really meaningful for people. It really strengthens the connection that you have with people when it's sincere and when it's specific. So,
Sounds good. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about with regards to employee recognition?
well, I really encourage people that are listening to the podcast, take a look at today's blog post, because at the end, and actually all the way through, I basically tell the story of Becca Corporation, the IT brain power company in Duluth, Georgia. They're a great group, growing really fast, providing outsourced IT services, and they use Minions in their employee recognition program. So my point here is that they found something that their people enjoy. Okay. People think the Minions are fun. And I mean, you can go out and you look at the different photos. I was laughing because they had Minion, little dolls, but they had Minion marshmallows. They have Minion candies. They have Minion this and Minion that. They have crazy Minion stuff. And basically when someone goes above and beyond, they give them a Minion. And you can collect your Minions, and you can turn them in for prizes. Or what they find is a lot of people just keep the Minions. So they have this horde of Minions. And you'll see the pictures that in the blog post. I mean, some of them have like 3 sitting there. Others, they've got like 10. And they don't want to give up the Minions because they have to turn them in for cash or prizes. They don't want to turn them in. They just keep grabbing them, and they grab different ones. And then the person who gets the most Minions for, it's either a month or a quarter, gets $500. But they're having kind of fun doing it. And that's just it. Employee recognition should be fun. Another thing I'd say is that it's not just giving stuff. It's activities. When you can, it's nice when the activities can be during work hours. So, I mean, if you want to do a barbecue and you can do the barbecue during lunch at work hours instead of people taking away from personal time, that's great. Some work groups like to go out to a bar or go out to Dave and Buster's, play around, do some different stuff. I typically recommend you try to do an optional employee activity once a quarter. And a fun one is an escape the room event. A lot of techs particularly like that. You go into one of those escape the room places. They divide you into teams. Who can escape the room faster than the other one? That type of thing. Other people do company picnics. I love whitewater rafting. You could do whitewater rafting. You could do whatever works for the team. Ask the team what they want to do. And do some fun stuff, because when you're doing those company activities, it's a form of recognition. It's a form of sincere gratitude. Hey, thank you for what you're putting into the company. Thank you for being part of it. We value you. Some of those events, you're going to have family invited. And if you're going to have family invited, make certain who's ever organizing the event has activity for the age-appropriate activity for the kids who are showing up, for the spouses that are showing up. And what are people going to enjoy? If, your employee brings their family and the family's bored, that's not a good event. What you got to do is serve people, make it happen, make it work. But once again, it comes back to your consistency and connecting people to meaningful work and reinforcing that you sincerely appreciate them. You do that well. I mean, it's a key component. Everybody wants to enjoy the people they work with in addition to the work that they're doing. and they want to feel valued as a member of the team. That sound okay? I forget anything?
That sounds great. I think we can wrap it up. People should go visit manage2win.com/blog to check out your latest blog post on the topic of employee recognition. And I think that's it. We can wrap it up.
All righty. Well, thanks. Ask us any questions. Shoot us an email if you have any questions on it.
Yes. Send us an email to info@manage2win.com, and we'd love to hear your feedback.